more hands-on portion of the day. So a couple of things before we get going. Everybody should have a copy of the slides, a copy of the steps that we're going to follow, the ViziApps demo instructions, 2 pages or 1 page double-sided. This color thing, this is actually the handout that I had downstairs, but I'm including this so you can just get a visual sense of some of the kinds of things that you can do, and some 6 suggestions. You actually might call these more like lessons learned painfully, but some things to keep in mind. And finally, the design template. And I'll talk about all of these as we go. All right, so all right, and one last thing before we get going. Everybody should have, if you're going to just simply watch what we do, then you're fine. You don't have to do anything. If you actually want to work on the app, you should have set up the ViziApps user account, and you should have downloaded the ViziApps app to your phone. All right, it's the little orange square, blue circle, white check mark. Good. All right, now we're cool. All right, so welcome to a deep but non-techie dive into mobile. And what we're going to do here is really examine in a little more detail how the app works. Okay, so a deeper dive into an app and the tool. I'm basically the same person I was 15 minutes ago, so I'm not going to go into that in much more detail, except to say that I am, for you guys who missed the earlier session, I'm actually certified as a developer / trainer / consultant for this company called ViziApps, which is based outside Boston, and they make the authoring tool that I use, that we're going to use. So this is what we're going to cover, give you a quick overview of the whole picture, and then diving into the specifics of the tool itself, pages and page elements. In other words, an overview of the design side of creating a page in an app. Then we'll look at the database side, and I'll explain why this is important in a few minutes. And then connecting the app pages to the data in the database so that data can flow back and forth. User entries made in the app can go into the database, and the app can read information in the database and display it to the users. And then preview. All right, I will say that many years ago, I tried skydiving, and I remembered jumping out of a plane and wondering why I was jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. Doing live software work in a presentation is a little bit scarier. Be patient. Okay, so first of all, the app. Now, the app, as I say here, was an app for an evangelical church north of Boston. And what you're seeing here is the home page of the app. And one of the reasons I brought up skydiving was that one of the things that I was going to do was, there is a tool that you can use called Reflector that will mirror, that will demonstrate iPhone pages on a Windows machine, which is what I have. It sometimes works and then sometimes doesn't. At the moment, it doesn't. It seems to be some sort of firewall block. So what I'm going to do instead is just show you some of what's in the app by looking at the development platform itself. You won't be seeing it live, but you'll be seeing it almost live. So, hang on a second. All right, so here This is also cloud-based, so which means that it's sort of dependent on just network traffic. The more traffic, the more it may slow down a little bit. Just be warned. So here's the front screen. You open it up, and there are 4 icons here, or 5 actually, or not icons, but buttons. If you ignore the obvious blatant sales, call it the credit link, which would jump users to my website. And by the way, for you guys who were here in the first session, if you click this, you will jump to my website in a non-optimized form, which means you're going to see my full website squashed into an iPhone screen. It works, but it doesn't really look good. One of the things on my list is to mobilize my website, create a mobile optimized version. In the meantime, you can click on the About Us link. There's a Participate link, a Sermons link, and a Contact Us link. If you click on the Contact Us link, this would simply jump you to a page. Let me show you some of the simpler stuff. Would jump you to this page where you could simply tap either button. It would open up an email page and with the address pre-filled. So all you'd have to do is type the title and then type the message. All right, if I go back, I'm doing this kind of backwards now. You'll see why in a minute. If I go to the sermons page, this will just take me to a page that contains a list of all the sermons since such and such a date. They're basically a list of podcasts. So you can hear the minister, the pastor, and the associate pastor. If you click on the About Us link, it will take you here, which gives you a very, very condensed message. This is the direction of the church. And you can do 2 things. You can go to the full website, which will do just that, or basic church information. And it took some thought as to what constituted basic church information, but we narrowed it down to what's the address and the times for the Sunday services, what's the address for the office, and if somebody doesn't know where these places are, and Massachusetts driving is notorious for basically consisting of paved over cow paths for which you really need a GPS or Google Maps. Click either of those 2 map buttons and it will take you to the Google Maps page and ask you, can I use your current location? You say yes, it will direct you. And finally, if you click this Participate button, it will take you here. So these are actual members of the congregation. The rowdy one on the right is my wife. And 2 buttons here. Announcements will open up the events listing. And the second one, Submit Prayer Requests, is just that. If you have a prayer request that you want to send in, the way I set this up is that at the bottom of this screen, there's a smaller sort of demure button. That's a login button, because there were 2 security issues that we wanted, but we wanted to keep it fairly simple. One was that the pastor wanted it set up so that the only people who could post events were he and the associate pastor and the office staff. So in order to post an event, you have to log in. The second thing was for prayer requests. We don't want prayer requests to be seen by the whole congregation. So in fact, prayer requests never appear in the app. The only way for anyone to see a prayer request is to go into the database, which is nothing more than a spreadsheet. But the only people who know the passwords to get into the database are the office staff, which means nobody can see a prayer request except the office staff and the people who coordinate prayer requests. That's it. So basically, that's the app. All right, so questions, comments before I go on? Okay. then moving quickly, a couple of things here. First of all, so a very quick tutorial on app design. First of all, make sure you define the goals, make sure you limit them, because it's really easy to keep piling features onto an app to the point where it becomes unworkable. You have to know whether users understand the concept in the first place, because we think they do, but they may not. There's a feeling that apps don't need help because they're so easy to use, but that's not necessarily true. People may not understand the concept, and the best example I can give you is this. Fruit Ninja, for those of you who were not here, okay, you know what it is. Is everybody familiar with Fruit Ninja, especially you guys who were not here earlier? Okay. Jay is my baby brother, who is an aerospace engineer for a defense contractor around the Bay Area. Very bright guy. He works on things that explode, sometimes because they're supposed to, sometimes they're not supposed to. But at one point we were talking about apps, and I said, you know, there's this thing called Fruit Ninja. Why don't you take a look at it? And he took a look at it, and if you've never played it, again, fruit comes flying onto the screen, and you have to slice it with your ninja sword, and every once in a while a bomb comes flying onto the screen, and if you hit it, the bomb blows up and the game's over. So I told him about Fruit Ninja, and about a month later we talked, and he said, by the way, I have to ask you, yeah, well, how are you supposed to slice the bombs in Fruit Ninja? Because every time I hit them with a sword, they blow up and the game is over. In other words, he completely misunderstood what the point was, which was don't touch the bombs. In other words, he got the interface wrong. And again, you know, this is a guy who sends spacecraft around the sun. So people will not always understand what you're doing. Determine what features you need. There are a lot of features. And again, I'm not really going to go through this in any detail. You know, do you need internet access? Do you want to use the GPS? Do you want to use the camera? Et cetera, et cetera. Make sure you group related items. This is from an app in their template list. And this is it's basically a I've bought something and want to bill it to my credit card kind of app. So all the related tasks or the related entry fields, what's the item, how much did it cost, what's the tip, what's the tax, give me the total, everything is together. So functionally it's clean. You could actually even get rid of this graphic and make it a little cleaner in my opinion, but this isn't my app. Make sure there are clear transitions between screens. You don't want the user getting confused. Design for the small screen because you have no space to waste. KISS is keep it simple. Minimize typing. I don't know about you guys. I actually know some people who can type or who can text with their thumbs. Debbie, thank you. Little side joke. Debbie pointed out that I would have a much easier time if I was trying to type with the edge of my thumb rather than the tip of my index finger. Yeah. But it's still hard to type. And granted, I've got fairly large hands, but still. The less typing you do, the better. Make it attractive. Remember what you're being compared to. This is, one of my hobbies is astronomy. This is a page from one of the apps astronomy apps that I use. You know, this looks pretty neat. It's colorful, it's graphic. Your church app exists in an environment where people see things like this all the time. This is what you're competing against. Think about the aesthetics. Here is the exact same page in 3 different iterations. The first one is, this is an app that you would use at a conference, maybe say at biola.digital, where you're meeting people and you want contact information. So type the user's name, type the user's phone number, and there would be a list here. This is one of these rolling barrels. It's called a picker. And you wouldn't see the name of states. You would program it with the options that you want, pick the option that you want, tap the save button, and then you're done. So you want to tap the home button. Oh, but that's kind of a waste of space. So what I'll do is get rid of the home button, move it up here. Because this is a repeated object in each screen. That's great. What if I have users who don't speak English? Well, what I did was I replaced the home button with a little icon, which I hope you'll interpret as go home. Or actually what I do now is I just use a little home with a chimney icon. It's total cliche, but everybody understands what it means. All right, think about things like font size, font color, background color. If you're developing for the iPhone and or the Android, you have to think about inconsistencies between the two platforms. By the way, just on a timing thing, how long, this goes to when? What time, what? This goes to noon. Okay. The picker, for example, again, that rotating barrel in the iPhone, you cannot shrink it. It's a fixed size, and it takes up a lot of screen space. That's one problem. Second problem is that if you're developing an app that's going to be used on both iPhones and Androids, there is no picker. In the Android, the picker converts to a drop-down list. So here you would tap this drop-down button. So it does the exact same thing, but you totally lose the effect. So if you're designing for the effect of the picker, the barrel, you've just lost it on Android. It still works, but you've lost it. How many hands do your users have? And this is, I know there's some obvious jokes there, but do you have an app which has to be used two-handed? You know, one hand holds it, one hand navigates it. I'm a righty, so I hold the phone in my left hand. But do you have an app that somebody might have to use one-handed using their thumb? Do you have an app that somebody might have to use no-handed? There are, for example, apps that are used by runners that are held to their upper arms with Velcro straps, and they can use Siri or one of these talk to me apps and ask it questions like, will this race ever end? Or something like that. What's the range of motion? All right, you'll find that you have a certain amount of range of motion in your thumb, but then the question is, where do you put the controls? Because the controls, standard controls tend to be at the top, like go home, go back. They're often at the top. But any control that can do something bad, like delete an entry, is often at the bottom because it's very difficult to hit a fatal control with the heel of your thumb. So you want it tucked out of the way. You want it in an easily seen, easily accessed place, but you don't want it easily tapped. What distractions are there? Where is somebody going to be using this app? Are they going to be using it at a ball game? Are they going to be using it in the middle of a Sunday service? What's the ambient light like? In other words, if they're using it in bright sun, outdoors, you're going to want very high contrast. If they're going to be using it in lower light, like inside the church, then maybe you can use lower contrast, something that looks a little nicer, perhaps. Also, always think about the size of your fingertip versus the size of a mouse pointer, especially if you have users who are coming into apps from the PC or from a Mac, from something with a mouse. It is, I don't know about you, I have a really hard time. And you'll see if you look at that color piece that I handed out, you'll see that all the apps I developed have these really big buttons. Because to a degree, I'm designing for myself. I want something I can tap without tapping the adjoining button or the adjoining icon. You may not agree with me. Those of you who've done apps may think that I'm sort of violating Apple's standard, which to a degree I am, but it works. So, okay, that's the overview. Overview of ViziApps. The tool replaces traditional development with a GUI model, graphic user interface. In other words, there's no code. So the concepts are simple and largely familiar. In other words, you figure out what data flow you want, and then you create a page for each data flow. and then you add buttons and data entry fields. It's almost like drawing screens. It's really what it is. On the data side, this is one of the things that, in my opinion, distinguishes it from a lot of its competitors, is that it does have some very high power at the high end. For you guys who are new in this session, are any of you programmers? Okay. Okay. You may be, you're probably familiar with SQL databases. Okay. It supports SQL databases. It supports something called QuickBase. It supports two kinds of web services. You guys who are not programmers, a few seconds of gibberish. It supports SOAP and REST on the web services side. But on the light side, you can do almost anything you need with Google Docs spreadsheets. And when I say almost anything you need, I mean it. Because I've done some fairly complex stuff using nothing more than a Google Docs spreadsheet, and the concepts are simple. So you get shorter time to market, lower cost. To a degree, this is company hype, but I would sort of agree with it. When I can do an app in 6 hours, I would agree. So what you do is, and this I just sort of stole shamelessly off their webpage, you develop, you test, change something, test, change something, test, and when you're done, publish, hope for the best. One of the other things that distinguishes this from, I think, a lot of its competitors is that ViziApps app that I asked you to download is actually a live previewer. Every one of these tools has a preview feature, but the preview feature is running on a machine which is totally unrealistic. My laptop has 8 gigs of RAM. You know, it's totally unrealistic. My desktop has 16 gigs of RAM. Totally unrealistic. There are no network traffic delays. But if you're actually testing on this thing live, this is real. So basically, the steps are you start the app, define the interface. On the design pane, you define the data handling on the manage data pane, and then you publish. So, all right. You with me so far? I'm moving pretty quickly through this. Is everybody okay so far? Any questions? If anybody has any questions, by the way, just jump in. Okay, let's take a quick look at the interface. When you start, this is what you're going to see. You're seeing the My Solutions page, which is really nothing more than a list of all the apps that you've created. So if you want to edit an existing app, you just pick it. If you want to create a new app, you can either create a new app completely from scratch, or you can create it based on a template by selecting this template app and pick the template you want. One of the reasons that we're able to do this is that when I developed this app, I had the ViziApps engineers add this app to the template list. So you can now grab the entire app because it pre-exists in the template list, and we're just going to modify it. But this is the main development screen, and what you see over here is what's called the canvas. These over here are all the objects that you can add to the canvas. Over here on the far left are all the things you can do to those objects, edit them, copy them, paste them, delete them, etc. Various properties settings up here. There's more property settings. There's a storyboard down here. And right here, select app for test. When you select that button, that's what tells ViziApps to run this app in the preview app on your phone. All right, everybody with me so far? All right, again, here are the objects. And you'll notice I can do anything from a label to an image, to a button, to a switch, to a table, to the picker, to the GPS, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of options here. And if I want to insert an object, I click it. And what that will do is insert the object on the canvas. And it doesn't know where I want it, so it just centers it, and then I have to drag it into place. And it will open up its properties box. This is important. This is where you tell the tool what properties this thing has. So every object has to have an internal name, a code name. So for example, and you can set up whatever standards you want. One of the standards that I use is I'll always call an object by its name. So whenever I create a button, I'll call it btn _ name of the button. So this way, if I'm trying to find all the buttons in a list, all I know is look for anything that starts with btn. It saves time. Button label. What do you want the user to see on the label? And then things like the text size, color, and then the important thing is what do you want to have happen when the user taps that button? And every item that has some action gives you this list of actions. The list may change a little bit depending on what you're doing, but you can say go to a particular page. If something happens, go to a particular page, otherwise go to a different page. Go to the previous page. Get or send device data via web data source, which is an incredibly clunkily worded way of saying go to the database and do something. Make a cell phone call. Open Facebook, or open a texting page. Send an email message. Take a photo. Capture a signature. Log into mobile e-commerce. Initialize the card reader, the card swipe unit. Manually charge a credit card. Void a credit card charge. And there's more things coming. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility here, which again is one of the reasons why, as I said in the previous session, I pretty much picked this tool over the others, at least that were out there so far. My standard has always been for in any field in which I work, I'll be certified in at least 2 tools, because that way a potential client will look at me and won't think that no matter what they need, I'm going to say, use ViziApps. What I'll say is, let's see what tools best fit your needs. So I'm looking for a second one, but so far I think this is one of the tops, just because, partly because of this list of actions. Select app for test. This is the button up here, upper right, that will automatically tell ViziApps to display this app in the preview app on your phone. All right, various options for your app pages. Create a new app page, copy it, move it, delete it. You know, it's sort of housekeeping stuff. That's the interface. All right, so I'm obviously blasting through this, but any questions about what I've shown you so far? Sir?
Is it capable of using like the Google APIs in terms of like connecting to Google services and stuff like that, or is that sort of?
Sorry, the question was, is it capable of using the Google APIs? Officially, not yet.
Okay.
Let's say there are some things on the roadmap. This is like, the company is still sort of in startup mode. Okay. And as with every startup, there's a gigantic list of things to do real soon now. Mm-hmm. That's one of them. Okay. When? I don't know. Okay, any other questions? All right, let's look at the database. How does the tool handle data? And then specifically, let's take a look at GDocs, Google Docs. So data handling, it supports, as I said, web services. Again, these 2 types. It supports SQL database. And I realized as I look at this slide, there was an update that I made earlier but didn't make on this slide, because it also supports a database called QuickBase, which is actually a very widely used type of database. And again, it supports Google Docs, GDocs. All these options are available from the Manage Data screen, which you see here. So there's help sprinkled all over the place, some of which I wrote, some of which the engineers wrote. But it's going to say for the current, for what app are you defining data, what kind of data, and then depending on what you selected, you have to connect to the database, and from then on, you can start doing things. So we're not going to do anything new here, but I will show you an existing instance. Again, only because I know there's a limit as to how much I can squeeze into an hour and 15 minutes. So let's take a look at Google Docs. Is anybody here using Google Docs now? OK, is anybody not familiar with Google Docs? Google Docs, all right, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so think of that as sort of an academic question. Think of Google Docs as Google's freeware-based version of Microsoft Office. It has basically all the same features that Office does, and some that Office doesn't. One of the things it does is it lets you work online, lets you collaborate, but the business subtext is to undercut Microsoft. Google and Microsoft hate each other, and if Google can do anything to undercut Microsoft by reducing the number of Office users, that reduces Microsoft's revenues. It's a strange world. But why use the Google Docs spreadsheet for this? Really for two reasons. Anybody in business, and business can include church management, has used a spreadsheet. I'm willing to bet. Has anybody here, well, if anybody here has never used a spreadsheet, ask somebody to teach you or get one of the million books out there on how to use spreadsheets just to get an idea what they do. They are tremendously useful tools in general. So they're familiar to anybody in business, and they're easy for non-programmers. You don't have to be a SQL database. SQL, if you're wondering or care, stands for Structured Query Language. I don't think anybody really cares. You don't have to be a programmer. So here is the main screen of Google Docs, which has now been upgraded to something called Google Drive. One of the nice things about Google is that they're constantly experimenting and bringing out new things. One of the bad things about Google is that they're constantly experimenting and bringing out new things, and things may change in the middle of some task that you're performing. But basically, this is Google Docs/Drive, and you notice a couple of things. I've got this button, red button over on the far left, and right here. What these do is they let you create a new spreadsheet within Google Docs, or they let you upload an existing spreadsheet into Google Docs. For example, your church might have its membership list in a spreadsheet that you're using as a database, and you could import that entire list of the membership and use it as the data for a project, for an app. All right, so let's take a closer look at what a spreadsheet looks like. This is pretty straightforward. And like most spreadsheets, it has rows and columns and so on. And what you're seeing here is two sets of entries. And then down at the bottom, different worksheets. So I have one spreadsheet, but I've broken it up so that I've said to keep things relatively simple for me as a developer, I decide that anything involving events goes on one worksheet called events. Anything involving actually new users doesn't even belong here. That's a feature that I took off. But I always get nervous about modifying a spreadsheet just before a presentation. Sermons, this is where the list of sermons will go. This is where the list of prayer requests will go. This is from some programmatic information so that when the user makes an entry, I want to be able to check the entry and say, is it right? And then if it is, send you back some feedback that says, got it, thank you. Or if it's wrong, send you back a message that says, I'm sorry, please try again. All right, so, all right, again, we've got the worksheets. Every worksheet has a little pop-up menu so I can delete it, copy it, rename it, protect it, hide it, do all kinds of things. All right, for ViziApps specifically, a column in a worksheet is called a field. All the columns across, in other words, a row, form what's called a record. So field names are in the first row of each column. They have to be in lowercase, no spaces. Don't even use underscores, just ram everything together, because Google can get a little flaky. So for example, what we see here, I'm in the prayer requests worksheet, and I have two columns. One of them is called prayer rec name, and then there's prayer rec details. So these are the two pieces of information that somebody's going to enter when they enter a prayer request in the app. I want to know who you are and what you're asking for. You notice, so row 1 are the field labels. Rows 2 and down are the real data. You notice row 2 says dummy, dummy, because you cannot have a blank record starting off. In other words, the first row has to have something in it, even if it's just make-believe data. If you leave these two blank, you'll get an error. And then after this, we start getting things, real entries. So on the dark side, we have an entry, whoops, we have a request from, we have a request from Jane Doe, and the prayer request has to do with her mother's cancer. On the lighter side, we have a request from Carrie, who is an English setter and my office manager, who is asking for more walks. I'm just sort of fleshing out the data just to put something into it. You have to control the access. It is initially, when you first create this spreadsheet, you are the only person who can access it. It's yours. But in order to make this work, to allow everybody to add prayer requests, add events, et cetera, you have to make it globally open. And the way you do that is by changing the share settings. And there's a share button in the upper right corner of the main of the spreadsheet page. You would click that, and you get the sharing settings dialog box. Everything I'm showing you, by the way, takes the biggest problem. The most tedious task is adding the content into the spreadsheet. All this spreadsheet management stuff maybe takes a couple of minutes. So you're going to say, who do you want? Do you want to allow specific people to edit it? Or do you want to control who has access to it? And you would change it to public on the web so that anybody, any user who finds the app can make an entry in the app without having to log in. Any of you can make entries to this app. All right. So, you with me so far? Basically, all you're doing here is creating a spreadsheet. And based on the data analysis, or the app analysis, the needs analysis, the goals analysis that you did before starting the app, you will have created the spreadsheet, figured out how you want to segment the data. In other words, some of the entries will have to do with church events. Some of the entries will have to do with prayer requests. Some of the entries will have to do with picking sermons from a list of sermons, or picking podcasts, or picking video casts, or something. All right? So we now have, and then based on that, we've defined the app pages, we've defined the spreadsheet, and now what we need to do is connect them.
So on the access,
yep.
You can change the access for each different part of mobile.
Question, can you change the, on the access, are you saying can you change the?
Yeah, like on the prayers, you might want more people.
On the spreadsheet pages, can you change the access?
For specific worksheets. You're going to change it for the spreadsheet as a whole. So the assumption is that when you make the spreadsheet editable by everybody, globally accessible and editable, that means anybody can see it, which means if there are things that you want to prevent access to, you're going to have to do that through the app. by requiring, for example, that certain features are only available after the user has logged in. Like,
Can you segment it where part of it is, everybody can access part of it, only certain people can't? Or is it has to be the same for the whole?
as far as I know, it has to be the same for the whole app. Do you guys know, is there a way to segment access on a Google Docs spreadsheet without getting into code?
There is, but it requires adding people individually, so the management of the, so you can set the entire app to be like really scaled down, but if you know specific people who can have access to it that way, but that adds another layer of management in terms of you have to manually add all those people.
Right.
Probably want to use a real database at that point.
Yeah, if you want to manually specify who can get it rather than just saying global access, as this gentleman pointed out, you can list specific names, which is not as much fun as it sounds when you've got several hundred names. So as Jason pointed out, at that point you'd want to use a real database of names, which will work, but at that point you've suddenly bumped up the complexity. So.
On Google Docs, can you select who can read and who can write?
You can, same thing.
Same thing?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So again, you can do it, but you may have to decide, is it worth the effort? Okay, any other questions? All right, how do we connect them? Well, there's a bunch of things that you can do in ViziApps, some of which have nothing to do with data. In other words, I can add an email link quite easily. I can add a link out to a web page quite easily. A whole bunch of things which have nothing to do with data. But what we're talking about here is specifically the data operations portion. What you can do is grab data in the spreadsheet and insert it in the app. For example, you might have a list of church events for January. In the spreadsheet, you can grab those events and display them in the app on a page called Events for January. You can do the opposite. Take a new entry in the Events for January or prayer request and put it into the spreadsheet. You can do an update. You can say, change all instances of events where date equals, where subject equals Financial Peace University, and change it to Ramsey or something like that. And then you can do a delete. Maybe it's June 5th. So you say, look at the list of events where month equals May and delete. So you can do a lot of management through the app. All right, how do we do this? This is one of the more terrifying things, but it's actually fairly straightforward. What you do is you simply go to this screen called Manage Data, select the data type for a new project. So let's say you're creating a new project and it says, it's asking you, how do you want to do data management? And you say, I want to use Google Docs. You've selected that. You connect to you log in and connect to the Google Docs spreadsheet. You're done. Once you do these two things, unless the app gets corrupted somehow, you'll never, and breaks connection with the database, you'll never have to do this again. Then what you do is you select what's called a tap event. A tap event is a button. In other words, we have a button called Submit My Prayer Request. And you want to say what happens when the user taps that button. The button is referred to as a tap event. So you say, I want to specify, I want to mark out, I want to define what happens when the user taps that button. And then you specify the commands. You specify any conditions and repeat. Okay, sounds pretty easy. For example, in the Send My Prayer Request button, what we want to do, or what the app does, is it reads the name and the request that were entered in those two fields on that page, and it sends them to the appropriate fields, the corresponding fields in the prayer requests worksheet, and writes them. That's it. And the way I set this up, to sort of come back to your sort of both your questions about security, since I didn't want the whole world to see the prayer requests for obvious reasons. And I could have gone through some fairly complicated gyrations to control that to set it up so that only the pastor, the associate pastor, and the person in charge of praying for prayer requests could see those. All I did was I simply did not add a page in the app that said, show me all the prayer requests. So that way, the only way to see them is to go to the spreadsheet. It's kind of a brute force method, but it was simple. Did that make sense? Okay. So here's the prayer requests page. And you notice I'm saying all prayer requests confidential because people are often very nervous about doing anything on an app when you're broadcasting something painful out into the ether. You're afraid who's going to see it. And then simply specify what's your name and what are you asking for. All right, and you'll notice, or trust me when I say, over here on the right, in the storyboard, I can see that I have this field called From Name Field, and that's referring to this. And then I have another field called Prayer Request Field, that's referring to this. And then I have a button. It says Send Prayer Request Button, that's referring to this. And you notice here I broke my own rule because I should have called this BTN Send Prayer Request. One of the hardest parts about consistency in programming is being consistent. But so these are our three main characters. This is the name of the requester, this is the object of the request, and this is the activation that sends the request in. All right, here's the data management. And what this is saying is, can you guys read this? This is some of the field labels here are a little small. Can you make these out? Okay, what this says is, what tap event am I programming? Well, I'm programming the Send Prayer Request button. To what spreadsheet? Well, I've already connected, so I don't have to specify it again. To what worksheet? What subunit? Well, I'm saying insert into. That means take information from the app, insert it into the spreadsheet. Into which worksheet? The one called Prayer Requests. And then very specifically, I'm saying take the entry in the From Name field on the device and insert it into the Prayer Request Name field in the database. And then I'm saying, again, take the entry in the Prayer Request field itself, add it to the Prayer Requests Details field, and I'm done. All I'm saying is take information in this field, put it here, information in this field, put it here. All right, is everybody with me so far? Okay. And this is the result. So somebody would have entered Jane Doe as the person who's asking for prayer, and the subject is for her mother's cancer, etc. And this will go automatically after tapping one button into the spreadsheet. Okay? You with me so far? All right, finally, preview. And again, the beauty of this thing is preview is that it's live. So on my phone, which I would dearly love to be showing you live, but firewalls. So I'm going to tap, and I'm going to get the splash screen, the ViziApps splash screen, up for a few seconds, and yeah, we have fairly good reception here. So the ViziApps splash screen shows up for a few seconds, and then it's replaced by the app home page. Now, what you're seeing here is the previewer. This is not the live app. So, you'll work it, develop the app, modify the app, make changes, save, preview, make changes, save, preview. And each time you preview it, you'll be seeing it live on the phone in a live preview. But what that means is that you're seeing the fully working app, The data works. Any entries you make in the preview go into the spreadsheet. Any reads that you do in the preview read from the spreadsheet and display data on the phone. Okay? Very flexible. And the only difference is that this is preview. Once you publish, you probably don't want that big ViziApps V splash screen showing up every time you open your church app. The only way to get rid of that is to publish, because this is actually the ViziApps preview app, and they obviously want their credit line. All right. You may be thinking, is it possible to publish, to use the previewer as a publish? In other words, not to publish the app to the App Store, but literally distribute the previewer? Okay. If you're wondering that, the official answer is no. Although, one thing to worry about is this. When you finish, you'll have to get it into the vendor's store. Getting an app into the Play Store is pretty much peanuts, because Android is very accepting. Apple, as I said earlier, will turn you down for any reason imaginable. It's Thursday. We don't like you. The problem also is that it may take Apple says it will take 5 to 10 days to get a decision. So normally that's fine, because you're not under commercial pressure to get the app out now. I will say, don't quote me on this officially, I will say there are cases where ViziApps management has made an exception in cases where you do need the app now, and you don't have 5 to 10 days to get it through the App Store with the off chance risk that Apple may say no. So in fact, I mentioned again in the earlier session, I did an app that was the voting app that was used at this MIT technology incubator about 6 or 8 weeks ago. And things were changing so fast that I finished the app 15 minutes before the show started. And if you've ever had the experience of having your stomach in your mouth, that's what it was like. But there was no way that we were going to get this into the App Store. And I persuaded ViziApps management that it would be a good idea to actually run the voting app through the previewer, because that way they got a lot of exposure to an audience of 300 venture capitalists. And they agreed, but that was definitely a one-of-a-kind thing. It's not going to happen very often, but it can happen. It did. So, okay. Officially, that is the end of the theoretical discussion. Does anybody have any questions before we start? Sir?
How does it track which record you're on? Is always the next line, the next blank line? And if somebody makes a change in the table in Google Docs?
Yeah, the question was, how does it track what data you're on in the database, in the spreadsheet? Yeah, what it will do when you're adding data is it will go to the next blank line. If you're modifying existing data, you could say delete all entries where, you could say delete all entries, which will have some really unpleasant consequences. I did that once before realizing that you forgot the condition. Fortunately, it was a very tiny range of data, like 3 lines. So what you would do for, if you're adding new data, you would just say insert this new entry and it will go on the next blank line. If you're doing anything to existing data, you have to give it a condition. So you would say update congregant name where church equals Saddleback East. Change Jones to Smith where church name equals Saddleback East. You give it conditions. And it's quite good. It's very predictable. I've never had a problem with conditions unless it was my mistake.
Does it get mixed up if somebody goes in and deletes a field?
Oh, well, okay. What we're going to do, what everybody does with this tool at first is they do work with the spreadsheet open. Because I will say, the first time I saw it, and I see this constantly, you're sitting here and you make a change on the phone and you see the change appear on the spreadsheet right in front of you. And it really is almost like magic, considering that what you did on the phone has just gone to a satellite relay station up to West Star 6, down, around, and this has all happened in a fraction of a second. The reality is you never work with the database open because the results can be unpredictable. If you need to open the database, you just warn people, do not use the app between midnight and 1 a.m. Maintenance in progress. Because I have worked like that, and I know what will work, what I can do with the database open, but I also know what I can't do safely. So you work with the database closed, and it's fine.
You shouldn't make changes in the database directly.
You can, actually. In fact, when I said that the prayer requests thing, they would be making, the only people who could see it would be the office staff through the database. So they would probably want to get older entries out of the database after a while. And what they would do is select, say we have the issue of Jane Doe's mother's cancer has been given to the prayer team. Let us now remove that entry from the database in order to maintain the database. You delete the entire line. You don't want a blank line. And that seems to work. That seems to do it. All right, other questions? All right, let's go ahead and do this. So, all right, what we're going to do, we're going to add a new page called My Events. We're then going to create a link from the home page to our new page. We're going to add a table on that My Events page whose purpose is to find the list of events in the worksheet and list them. In other words, all we're doing is creating another page. That's going to do the same thing as the existing List My Events page, but you guys will do it. So, all right, so if everybody's ready, we're going to work off this list, this 2-page list of instructions. All right, I'm going to walk us through it. So I'll talk us through it, and I'll be doing it myself. So you'll see me doing it. If you want to go ahead, that's fine. Just make sure you read the instructions carefully before you do. All right, so what I'd like you to do is, all right, on page 1, step 1, open your browser. So I'm using IE9. You can use IE8. If anybody's using IE7 or earlier, don't, which may be easier said than done. If, are any of you in a corporate campus where the church actually dictates what browsers you can use? Okay, do you know what you guys use? You're on 8, okay, good. 8 is okay, 9 is better. There can be some odd problems under IE, even as recently as IE8. Firefox seems to be more predictable. Chrome seems to be more predictable, except when it's not. Sorry. There are times when I just don't even bother explaining this field to my non-technical relatives. Basically, you want IE8. So hang on a second, and let me just log out of here. Although I'm probably logged out already, but let's see. All right, so, all right, I'm just going to take it slow, make sure everybody's with me. Who's actually doing this live? You guys, okay, almost everybody. Okay, good. All right, so step 1 is open your browser. Step 2 is in the URL line. I want you to type www.ViziApps, ViziApps.com. Press enter. And by the way, it is exactly 25 minutes to 12. I say this as a gauge to time how long this will take. All right, so you're going to go to this incredibly eye-full homepage, and in the upper right corner, you may have to scroll to the right. There's a login button. Click that. All right, and in the username field, type whatever username you set up. And same thing in the password field. The password is case sensitive. In other words, it recognizes capital letters, etc. All right, so go ahead and log in. All right, and step 5, you should be here. If you're not here, you click this My Solutions tab up at the top. All right. Is everybody with me?
What's the password?
It's the password, should be the password that you entered when you set up your account, when you set up your ViziApps account. All right? Okay, so step 5, just to make sure we're all in the same place, click on the My Solutions tab right here. Okay, step 6, click on the Add a Template App button right below the My Solutions tab, right here. Sorry?
Is it
The
when I
dialog
click on
box.
my solution?
We don't have these.
There's,
don't have ad-
if you have that little help
Uh,
box,
yeah,
you
you
put
can
the
close it.
X
Click,
in it.
yeah, just click, yep,
Oh,
close the box. All right, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the list, and it may not be far enough, so what you do is you scroll the outer scroll bar down, like so. What you want to do is get to the very bottom of the list. You can see there's a lot here. But at the very bottom is Biola app. All right, is everybody here? Guys, you guys okay over there? All right, click on any of the screens in the Biola app. All right, and step 8, when a window asks for your app's name, click in the entry field and type My Church App. If you want to call it the real name, that's fine. All right, so type the name and then click the Add to My Account button. All right, it should take you back to the My Solutions page, and you should now see My Church App. Okay, does everybody have that? Anybody not have that? All right. Okay. Step 9, click on My Church App, or whatever you called it. And it's going to open up in the design pane. We can now start working on it. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we are going to add a new page. So I'm going to have to scroll a little bit. You guys may have to also. Are you seeing the full screen, full width of the screen?
Yes.
Okay. There's always often incompatibilities with projectors. So I'm actually not getting the full width. But what I want you to do is, step 10, click right here. Okay, this is a new page. And when you get the new page dialog box, call it my, all lowercase, my_events. Whoops. One thing to warn you about, it does not automatically put the pointer in the field. So you may do what I just did, start typing, only to realize that the pointer is not in the field. So call it my_events. Click on Save. And it should take you to the...
One more time, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One more time, just before that step.
You click the, right here, click the New Page button, New Page icon. And when the new page name shows up, just make sure you click in that field and then type my underscore events. All right, all lowercase. All right, so, and then it will open up your new page, which is blank. Click on the Save button right here. All right, so the first thing we need to do is give people a way to get to this page. So what we're going to do is add a button on the home page. So step 11, click on the pull down for the app page field right here and scroll up to the top and select home page. First option. All right, takes us back here. All right, step 12, add a button on the home page. So what I'm going to do is, hang on a second. All right, I'm going to click on button right here, not image button, just click on button. And it's going to open up the button properties dialog box. Okay, at the top, internal button name right here. Call it BTN, all lowercase, BTN underscore my underscore events underscore page. In the button label field, which is what the users will see, type my events in real English. All right, for the font color right here where it says select font color, select some shade of blue. Doesn't really matter what you do, just don't select white on yellow or things like that. All right, and finally for the action, down here where it says select action, click on that field and select get or send device data right here. And then click insert button. All right, so here's our button. We'll just, you wouldn't want it there, but we'll just leave it there for the time being. All right, so now what we need to do, we now have navigation that will take us to that button. Now what we need to do is add navigation to that button, to that page. So what I want you to do is, first of all, click Save. All right, anything you do, click Save. And now, step 13, go back, open up the login page. So click the pull down right here for the pages and scroll down a little bit, and here's login page. Click on that. And what we're going to do is just reuse some existing buttons rather than recreating them. So click in the upper left, click on the home button and scroll a little bit. Select at the far left, select copy field. All right, go back to the field pull down, sorry, the page pull down right here and select my events. Come back over here, far left, and click on Paste Field. We just inserted the button. All right, is everybody with me? All right. We need to do this once more for the back button. So what I want you to do is simply, again, go back to the app page, pull down right here, go to the login page, click on the back button. Over on the far left, click on copy field. All right, go back to the page pull down, back to my events. And over on the far left, click on paste field. and it's now put the button in. You notice it's shifting the button insertion positions a little bit. So that's good, but not that good. So we'll click on the back button, and I can just use the arrow keys to shift it a little bit to the left. And as I do, you notice how it's giving me the coordinates. All right, so I think we can live with that. So just do a save. All right, is everybody with me so far? Okay, this is obviously very mechanical, partly because I kept it that way to make sure it worked in the time we have. What we want to do now is insert the table that will list the events. So what I want you to do is make sure that you're on the My Events page. Just do a save on General Principles. And step 15, in the list of objects that you can insert over here, click on Table. All right, and it's now asking us what's the internal table name. So again, let's just call it all lowercase biola_events_table. Okay, the table display name, which the users will see, is My Events with proper English. Okay, table row type, right here where it says 1 text field, we want this to have 2. So select the next option, 2 text fields. All right, and we have to name the fields. So click here where it says enter 2 field names and type biola title, all one word, comma, biola description. All right, check your spelling. Anytime you type anything, it's dangerous. It's an opportunity for a typo. All right, and finally, select action right here, and select get or send device data, which is around here someplace. Here it is. And then click on the Insert Table button and do a save. Okay. We decide the table is crammed a little bit too much up against the buttons. So what I'd like you to do is just drag the table down a little bit. All right, and do a save. And we've we've created a page, created a link to it, inserted the table. We now need to code it. So we've done the interface. Now we need to do data management. Okay, is everybody with me so far? Any questions? Okay. So we're on page 2, step 18. Click, there's a button here called Manage Data, which is, hang on a second. All right, it's over here, far right, Manage Data. All right, click that, and it's going to bring up the data management screen. Now you notice right here, tap event for mapping device data. Click the pull down for select, and you should see BTN My Events page. That's the button we just created a few minutes ago. So right here, so go ahead and click that. All right, so we've now said this is the button we're programming. What programs, what commands do we want to attach? So step 20, click this button, this large button that says Add Database Command. All right, I'll warn you, this is the place where it can bog down sometimes depending on network traffic. Come on. Okay, do we have any reaction? Yours is. Okay. For those of you who are not getting a reaction, which includes me, Click on the Save button. And then click on the Add Database Command button again. There. All right. If you're not getting a reaction, what I want you to do is to just close this page. And then just immediately click the Save button again over here. We're back on the main page. And then click the Manage Data button again. We go right back in. All right. This is one of the problems of working with anything in the cloud, is that it can be dependent on network traffic loads. So it's just something that you get used to. So click again, the Tap Event button, select BTN My Events page. There we go. OK. And if necessary, click this Add Database Command button. And you notice, in my case, it actually held my command. I just ran out of patience before it did. So does everybody have this now? OK. So we want to do a select from, because we want to select from the events in the spreadsheet in order to display them in the app. So the default here is select from. Leave that. We want to pick the worksheet, and it lists them in order, picks the first one. So leave it set to events. All right, click on Save again, just to be on the safe side here. And then we now need to add the specific fields. So click this icon, Add a Field. And you should now have this. Does everybody see this? OK. You can try saving it, just bouncing out and bouncing in, or just watch what I'm doing. All right. So, and now we have to say from what field. So from database field, click it, and you notice there's a field here called Event Title. That's the one we want. And we're going to say we want to add whatever is in the Event Title field to the device field. And if I click, you notice here's all the fields in this thing. And sure enough, there's one here called Biola Title, which is the first column in the table. All right, let's do the second one. So click the Add a Field option again. All right, and now for the second one, from the database field, we want event description, the second one down. And we want to display that in the field in the table on the app called Biola description. And for you guys who are programmers who are thinking that I'm doing a really lousy name of consistent syntax for field naming, you're right. But I wanted to make sure that I could do this easily identifiably for this session. I'm just saying this in case anybody here is going to make fun of me. All right, so do a save. And ma'am, did it come up for you? OK. Do a save. Close the Manage Data screen. We're done. OK, we're back to the main screen. Do a save anyway on general principles. And now, up toward the top right, there's this Select App button. Click on that. All right, and you should now be able to, this is the part again where my stomach is in my throat, but you should now be able to pull out your phone. OK, open up the ViziApps app. And what you should have here is the app, except we've now added the My Events, or whatever you called it, button on the main screen. And if you tap that button, it should take us to another screen called My Events. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a junk phone call. Screen called My Events that should be listing log splitting, Orphans Thanksgiving, and FPU. Got it? All right, that's good. So that took us about 26 minutes. All right, you have a working app. What you can do, by the way, if you want, is you can follow these instructions to simply go back to the appropriate page and change the table name from My Event to, ma'am, what's your church's name?
Rolling Hills Covenant.
To Rolling Hills Covenant Church. You might have trouble fitting that on that line, but Rolling Hills Events. In other words, you can personalize this quite easily by just modifying the properties. Did anybody not get this to work? Okay, I'm actually pleased with myself then. Invariably, somebody makes a typographic error. So you guys all did well. You have a future as app developers. But, all right, so my point is that you never saw code. You never touched code. The closest you came to code was working with the spreadsheet to connect the spreadsheet fields to the app fields. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
So you want to go and create your spreadsheet first, even before you start this. Like you already have to plan your fields and know what you're going to be collecting first, and then you're going to build.
Exactly.
It's obvious, but I'm like, okay, first things first.
Yes, this lady put her finger on one of the crucial issues. I'm sorry, what's your name, ma'am?
Susan.
Susan put her name on one of the crucial issues, which I'll even extend a little bit. She said you want to define your spreadsheet first. I'll extend that a little bit, tie it back to something I said earlier, define your goals. Define what you want to do, and define how the data is going to be handled for whatever it is you want to do. So the goals here were on the data handling side, because remember, this app does other things. You can send an email to the pastor, please don't or he'll kill me, because it's actually a live link. But for anything that's data related, the data involved adding prayer request items, adding event items, logging in, and adding sermons to the list of sermons. So what that tells us is that there's 4 data items. Therefore, we need 4 worksheets. In other words, 4 subsidiary spreadsheets. We actually need a 5th one to hold feedback messages, good job, thank you, tap here to continue. But yeah, so in effect, what you're really doing is designing things in tandem. You're designing the app, and I'm thinking I actually have enough, I think there are enough of you guys, and I have enough sheets that I'll pass, if you do me a favor and just pass those around. But what I would do is just copy these, use these as your working templates, and I'll tell you it is a lot easier when you get it wrong to throw these away than it is to throw away several hours worth of programming. All right, the MIT app that I did had, if you just pass one to this gentleman behind, the guy, the client who originally designed it came up with 5 screens. I boiled it down to 2. I did a motorcycle maintenance app that had, I think it started with 24 screens, threw that whole design away, went to 39, threw that whole design away, wound up with 36. But if you think I was going to do that with live coding, And in fact, what I did was I drew out the screens in this template in soft pencil so that I could erase things, and then I could cut them out and arrange them in a stack and work my way through the stack. I cannot emphasize this, using this template enough. So figure out your goals, design the goals of the app, design the data flow of the app, and then design the corresponding spreadsheet. So that was sort of a long-winded answer to a very short and to the point statement by you. Thank you. Other questions? Comments? Good. I hope this is giving you a feel for what you can do, that you no longer have to be a programmer per se. You will never use this tool to create a church version of Angry Birds. This is not a game platform, sorry, unfortunately, but you can do an awful lot with this thing. I hope this has been useful, and I hope this is giving you some ideas, and thank you very much for coming.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.